But I'm excited for the rest of it. I think it has a lot of potential. I think that might be the name of this episode of the podcast is does it have the potential?
Welcome to the Weekly Fix podcast, where we're just two friends talking about our passions within movies, TV shows, gaming, and comics. Thanks for checking out the podcast. We hope you like it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Weekly Fix. My name is Jacob, and joining me, as always, is Zane. And we have a pretty fun episode this week because probably, I would say, undoubtedly, our favorite movie of the year has a TV show now. And if you guys aren't familiar with what we're talking about, that is Dune Prophecy, just premiered this past Sunday. So I'm excited to hear Zane's thoughts about it because we haven't had much of a chance to talk about it. And we had some fun DC news come out that I think is always interesting just because the world of the DC universe is really so unknown to us currently. So I think every bit of news that we get is super fun. Before we get into any of that, Zane, how are you doing this week?
Man, I'm doing great. We're coming into a really busy season for us. So last week was a flash because Chelsea was gone for the first half of the week. And then it just turned into a short work week, and then the weekend hit, and I started picking up reffing. So the reffing season's back in full swing. I actually had a game tonight that I reffed. I came back from that. Now we're doing this. We got the holidays coming up. Charlie's birthday's next week. So man, it's just one hit after the other. But it's a fun time. I really love this time of the year. It's exciting. It's just so joyous, and I really love the holiday season that we're about to go into.
Well, if you're anything like me, I think just having something always to do just makes life a little bit more exciting. Like, I'm not one of those people that particularly likes to sit around and just do nothing. So, like, having consistently, like, something next up on the schedule, something that can be fun and exciting, always, like, just makes your life better overall.
Yeah, well, apparently I feel that way because I generally never let my calendar be empty. I always seem to have something to do, and I know you are similar to that. So, but I did get to slip out to a new comic book store this week. I got to check out your favorite, Gotham City. It was pretty nice. I liked what I got to see. I actually did get to do a pickup. I got to see Batman Court of Owls, Volume 1. So I'm excited to kind of maybe start reading that soon. I know we're reading The Last Ronin for our Comic Corner, which is actually next weekend,
Yeah.
which is next Tuesday dropping. So that's exciting. But yeah, it was good. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, anytime we start talking about comics, man, there is so much good comic stuff out there. This is the most stuff I've ever had to read at one time, and it's partly due to just getting into comics as heavily as I have recently. But literally, I think you can go to a comic shop right now, go to the new selection of stuff, and even some of the older stuff. There's just literally so much stuff you could pick up, and you wouldn't make a bad decision. Like every week, I go in there and I go to my up to the desk, and I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to get my pulls and see what I have for this week. And every week I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe all of this stuff dropped in the same week. So yeah, that's super fun. And the cool thing about the Court of Owls is there's been lots of little rumors and hints that could be the direction of the Batman 2, which is something I actually haven't read. So I'm excited to hear you give your thoughts on it once you've read through it and maybe entice me a little bit more to go pick it up for myself. But yeah, that's a super exciting comic. Talking about The Last Ronin, your introduction into the Ninja Turtles, which I'm super pumped about. I think you're a little bit excited about that too. I think it's always fun anytime you get to read something you've never read before.
Oh yeah, something that you've never read before, but also is highly recommended and highly regarded as a classic is always super exciting to me. I know every time somebody recommends a classic movie to me, and their first opinion is that hey, like this is a great movie, you need to watch it. I really want to watch it. Like it really encourages me to watch it. And the same thing with comic books. If someone's like, man, this is a great comic run, and I've heard about it before, that kind of just triggers in my mind, okay, like, yeah, I should set aside the time to pick that up and watch it. Or pick that up and read it. So I am very excited, to finish that and talk about it next week.
That's the other cool thing about having a podcast is it gives us the opportunity to be like, hey, listen, I can't do anything for this amount of time because I have to read this comic. I have to watch this TV show. It's a requirement. So it's always fun having an excuse as to why we get to do the things that we do. But I'm super pumped for you to get into The Last Ronin. And like you said, the Court of Owls could be something really special and really fun for DC moving forward. So let's use that as an entrance into some of these DC rumors that we've been getting before we talk about Dune Prophecy a little bit. Because like I started off the podcast with, I think all the DC news we get right now is just super interesting because we know what the possibilities for a DC universe are because of what Marvel has been able to accomplish, right? I always think back, like, what if we hadn't gotten the MCU and we were starting to kind of get these rumors about what it could be, things that could be happening, how exciting that would be. So it's really cool that we're getting an opportunity like that with DC. You know, all these rumors we're hearing, we already know they have a great leader in James Gunn. And starting off with the Court of Owls information, is that something, I know we haven't read the comic books, but they're super highly regarded in the little things that we have heard about it. Is that something that you are excited about, that there could be a potential direction for that moving forward?
Personally, I really can't be excited about it because I haven't read it. Um, and also, that's also in the Reeves verse. So I know James Gunn, like, that's a little separate. And I'm okay with those being like separate, but I did almost pick up Brave and the Bold to
Okay.
read what James Gunn is planning for his Batman, so that I could kind of like compare and contrast to see what stories they're pulling from and kind of what we can expect from each of them. Because I love the comic content that he's been saying he's going to pull from for
Yep.
most of his movies. We ranted and raved about Woman of Tomorrow and how good that Superwoman comic was. So I was thinking, okay, Brave and the Bold's probably super good as well. And then I'm excited for Quarter Alice because I've heard it's a classic Batman storyline, but I haven't really touched it at all. And then just to know that Matt Reeves may potentially be pulling from that is super exciting because it is a more gritty, dark, and I feel like it might fit absolutely perfect in this Batman universe that he's creating, coming off the high of the Penguin. I think there's nothing that could have probably excited me more to read that comic than just those slight hints that they threw at us, that this may be coming. So I don't know. That's what really excited me for that, was just to know that, like, I really like that we're getting two universes. I know a lot of people may not, but I personally like that we're doing Batman grounded and then everything comic.
Well, I think the cool thing about like just the DC universe and in the Matt Reeves verse in general is it's really good to hear that they're pulling from comics. Like I also like the idea that we can have something to kind of base where these stories are going off of. I know that's something when Marvel was kind of first starting to get going. I always wanted to hear like this Iron Man is going to be kind of based off of like a comic, or this Spider-Man is going to pull from this comic. I think it's really good just to have that ground, and so it's nice to know that they're both pulling from potentially things like this. I mean, we know James Gunn he's very outspoken about it, but the fact that Matt Reeves could be doing those things as well, I think is really exciting, just to have a really good basis for something. And there are things that we know have been proven. So I think that also gives you a little bit, more peace of mind about what we could be getting, which I really do like. The other thing we have to talk about is James Gunn actually came out and said that Peacemaker season one will be canon to his universe, with the exception of the very final scene where the Justice League is shown. We talk a little bit about, stuff being canon, stuff being not canon. I'm not a big fan of when people like come out and say, "Oh, this isn't going to be canon for this reason." I don't like when people nitpick and pull things like that, but I do kind of understand where he's coming from with this. And he did also say that he's going to give a reason as to why that's not the case. But with that little bit of information that we did get, how do you feel about something like that, where James Gunn's kind of already coming out and saying like he's going to pick and pull what he wants to be canon in his universe?
I'm personally fine with it, especially with what he inherited. This is a creative masterpiece that and I use masterpiece from secondhand because I actually have not got to watch Peacemaker. It is on my agenda. I need to watch it, and I will watch it fairly soon. I just haven't. I know a lot of people love it. They rant and rave about it. Even non-comic book fans, such as my brother-in-law, I know he really loved Peacemaker, and I don't think he likes any comic book movies at all. Um, so that to me like says that this is going to be like a good show that I need to watch. I just haven't. But as far as like the canonized aspects, I'm fine with that. He inherited a broken universe. He got the opportunity to flex his creative juices to create the Suicide Squad, which I think was a very good DC movie in that universe. And then he got to have the spin-off, the Peacemaker, that he poured a lot of his time and his effort into. And I know there was a small suit, a very, very small Justice League cameo there at the end, and I'm fine with him pulling that. What I am interested about though is Suicide Squad canon and how that kind of plays into it, like his Suicide Squad, because we do have Harley Quinn, and so it does potentially start to cause some issues with just continuity when you are developing a new universe. You kind of probably should just start fresh without any issues. But as far as like just saying like in this show, this one particular thing that was done before I really had full creative abilities of this universe is not canon, but everything else is. I'm okay with that, but I do see like where some people would be frustrated and problems could arise.
I agree with most of those statements, and I agree with what you said at the very end there that I would have been happier with his DC universe just starting completely fresh. And I do understand he was given this universe. There are already projects in the works when he came on board that he couldn't just abandon. There have been too much time and money put into those things. And that all makes sense. But I think we were both under the impression I didn't really necessarily think Peacemaker was going to be canon. You also brought up a good point that is Suicide Squad now going to be considered canon. And one of the big things when you're starting these new universes is you need it to be easy to get into for the average viewer because we know we're going to watch it. He's going to have the comic book fans watching it. That's not a doubt in his mind. But the way these universes grow and become so popular and they get to those levels of Marvel and they get to those levels of Star Wars is there is an entry point and an easy jumping on point. And with the way that DC is right now, I feel like it is not an easy thing to jump into. Now, it's easy to jump into stuff like the Batman and Penguin because it's his own universe, and I think that's what got a lot of appeal to it, and a lot of people are willing to give it a shot because they know they don't have to watch all sorts of other stuff to get into the story and understand what's happening. So that's my biggest concern here. I necessarily don't care that he's saying, like, oh, this part of it's canon, but this part's not, especially since he also added that caveat onto there that, hey, I'm going to explain why it's not canon. That's perfectly fine by me. But it does need to be careful about the fact of him starting to pick certain things. Like, I am curious now, like you just said, is parts of Suicide Squad going to be considered canon? And if those parts are considered canon, I hope they're not canon enough to the point where I have to watch it. And whenever they do introduce a character that may have been in Suicide Squad or is in Peacemaker and things like that, they give us a little bit of background to that character when they first get introduced into the real DC universe that I know we're going to be getting.
That's actually what I was going to say. I think they're going to, because we're getting introduced into an established universe in his movie. Like we are getting thrown into a full fledged. There's already a justice. What is it? Uh, mm, American Justice League or something. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm drawing a blank, but we already have a superhero group that's going to be the base of the DC universe. Superman is going to have them in his. Mr. Terrific is there. There's a Green Lantern already established. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, that's an established universe character line. She is going to already been Supergirl for a while. And so
Mhm.
since we're jumping into these stories that are almost like midway jump off points, that it's easy for a first time reader or potentially viewer to jump into, uh, even though it's established. I think that also lends well to establishing or making something canon that has happened in the past. I think he's going to do a really good job of letting people enter in without having to go watch a plethora of stuff. They're just going to be able to, okay, this movie is a great standalone movie. These characters seem familiar. If I want more information, I'll go watch these movies. But I think everything's going to be very well done and self contained, especially in the thoughts that he's giving his directors creative visions and creative liberties to make their project their own. And I think that's really exciting. I think that's what James Gunn learned from Marvel is that the individual stories are more important than having a great overarching story. And I think that's what he's going to pull to the DCU that's going to really propel this forward immediately.
And one thing I do want to preface this with is I do still have full faith in James Gunn with what he's going to be doing with DC Universe. I have no doubt that he's going to put something out there that's going to be really fun to watch, really exciting, and I'm still all here for it. I just think those are things, we both touched on some things I do agree, like just having established characters can also be good and stuff like that. Not everybody needs an origin story. I think the ones that only need an origin story are those characters that you really want to be the focal point of your story moving forward. So that's where I kind of want to make sure that we do get like I'm interested to see how this Superman, comes to light. Like, are we going to get kind of thrown in where he's kind of been Superman for a little while and maybe we get like flashback? Maybe that information's already out there and I'm just not aware of it. But, those are the things I'm interested in. I do want to see how this Batman that he's going to have in his universe comes about. I like those origin stories for those really important big characters that we know James Gunn is probably going to put his own little spin onto. But for some of those characters, like I think Peacemaker might be a perfect example of just having a character that you don't really need to know everything about. But if you do want to learn more about them, that information is out there for you.
Well, in Batman, Brave and the Bold, we are getting introduced to Damian Wayne. So we're clearly 3 Robins deep.
Yeah,
Batman's been around for a while. He's already been with Ra's al Ghul's daughter, so Talia. So we're definitely not getting a Batman origin. I don't think there's any origin going to be done there, and if there is an origin, it's only going to be seen through Damien's viewpoint.
for sure.
So I think there is very little origins going to be given in James Gunn's universe.
Which again, I don't mind. I just hope it's done correctly. Like I don't
Yeah,
really want to
tastefully.
be. Yes, it just needs to be done well. I think there's some that have really done a great job of that. Like I think looking back at Marvel, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, we don't really see a whole lot of origin there. We just kind of get thrown into him being Spider-Man, and I think they did a really good job of that. And so if they can manage to do something like that in DC, I think that'll be really cool. And it's also good for sometimes for movies that we don't spend 30, 40 minutes of the movie just getting to know the character because the majority of people are going to know who they are already. But it's cool to just see kind of, what direction they want to go with that character.
Yeah, and I get that. But yeah, I
But
mean, it's an exciting time. Exciting time for DC.
I think every time we get DC news, I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting to hear. Like, we got a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
I
get
think
a little excited.
Creature Commandos is coming out soon, or it might already be out if I'm not mistaken.
December it drops
December.
with a
So
2-episode premiere.
I think that one might be fun. I think I saw something about that takes place like a year before Superman in his universe, or it's something along the lines. He compared it to Superman in some way. So that got me a little bit interested. I don't remember the exact thing that I saw, but no, lots of cool things. DC. I think that's all really the big DC news. If I'm incorrect, do you remember? Is there something else?
I think that's it that I heard. I'm just awesome. I'm just excited because I think it's like 2 months ago. You were like, I don't really like DC. It doesn't really excite me that much. Or like you just weren't familiar with it, and now we're
Yeah.
getting all this DC news. We just had the Penguin drop, and so we're like on this DC hype wagon right now, and
Yep.
it's exciting. It's a cool switch of pace. Like,
Well, it's too easy. It's like so easy for us because we're already comic fans, right? Like,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's easy to like hook us. We're like that fish that hasn't eaten for a few days, and James Gunn just threw that worm out there, and I'm like, I'm getting that worm. But it's super exciting. I'm super pumped for DC. And that's also going back to comics. I got to credit the comics a lot for that because the absolute universe that we're getting in DC has been phenomenal. Like it is such a good read. It is so fun. Issue 2 of Absolute Batman just came out, and again, it's such a different take on Batman. Like we're seeing so much different stuff. One of the things that happened, well, I won't say it because you might read it, but there's a lot of cool things going on in that absolute universe that's getting me excited for what James Gunn is going to do because I know he's going to have a little bit of a different vision for it. I know it's not going to be quite as different as what they're doing in absolute universe, like just giving us like these completely different Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman stories that we've never had before. But I am excited just to see how he puts his own spin on things because we know James Gunn likes to have a lot of flair with certain things. He likes to really put that James Gunn stamp on stuff. So I think that also has me more excited just for DC in general, knowing that he's going to do something really cool. And then I'm already getting excited due to these comic books I'm reading. It, like you said, it's a really, really fun time right now.
Yeah, man, such a good time.
It is always a good time when you're talking about comics and TV shows and stuff. But the big TV show this week, which in my opinion has really flown under the radar, and I think you would reiterate that as well, because I think a lot of people weren't even aware that it was coming out. When I told my wife, I think it was on Saturday, that there was a Dune TV show coming out, she wasn't even really aware that there was one. And I think that's how a lot of people are probably have felt. And I've said it, we've talked about it a little bit the last couple days. I think that's a big detriment to the show. But we have seen episode 1 now. What are your thoughts on episode one? Do you think it's kind of a good thing that this show has flown under the radar? And if it is good, it'll, kind of be passed along like word of mouth, very similar to The Penguin? Or do you think this is a show coming off such a high year of Dune 2 that needed more marketing, that needed more advertisement to get more people streaming this show?
Yeah, I personally, at this moment in time, don't think it needs any more advertisement or it need any less. I think it got the people who really love the universe excited for it and invested in it, and there is meat there. And for those who maybe missed the Dune bandwagon, who didn't buy into the universe, who didn't want more, who weren't like begging for more, I think it kind of kept them away from it. So I actually think it was probably really good marketing because we're going to get into it for a little bit, but I think this first episode did not do what it should have done in order to capture an audience. There's a lot of meat, there's a lot of excitement, and there is a lot of potential in the future of this show. But personally, I would say this first episode did not grip me, and definitely did not grip my wife in the aspect of we have to watch this show like next Sunday, like can't come soon enough. Which is really sad coming off the Penguin that, I was really kind of hoping for something to that level.
Yeah, fill
And
its
it
place.
did not. I did not think it performed to that level. I think there's potential, but boy, was it needed a little bit more for a first episode, in my opinion.
So I think I'll probably surprise you with my take on it because I did really enjoy this first episode, but I will reiterate a lot of the things that you said because I do feel like there is. I think the thing that has me most excited about it is the potential. I do think it was a very slow episode, not much happened, but I do think that's kind of the Dune philosophy of things. Like if you think about the first Dune movie, I know a lot of people like I really loved it. I thought the first Dune movie was super awesome. I didn't watch it when it first came out. I was one of those people that watched it. I think I watched it about 3 months before Dune 2 came out because everyone was talking about Dune 2 and how excited they were for it. So I was like, you know what, I'll watch Dune 1. Really, really loved it. But when I reached out to other people that had watched it, they were like, oh, yeah, it's kind of slow, kind of boring. I didn't really enjoy it as much. And that's kind of how I compare this first episode of Dune Prophecy is I feel like it was slow, it was a little bit boring, but you can kind of see the things that they're trying to get set up, which I think is really interesting. Now, I think there's a lot of things that I'm gonna need explained to me, as the show continues, because this is set 10,000 years before the birth of Paul Atreides, which is the main character in the Dune movies, played by Timothy Chalamet. So there's a lot of room that they have to kind of do whatever they want with, which I think is a good thing because we've talked about it a lot. I didn't want this show to damage the reputation of the Dune movies, which I feel like it very much still could because you still are putting that Doom name on it. But when you give yourself that much leadway, there's a lot more room for, not messing up stuff or not making stuff canon or like decanonizing things. There's so much stuff that you can do when you give yourself that window. But I do reiterate, like you said, there's a ton of meat here, there's a ton of potential, but I am excited for where it is to come. Now, it is hard following up the Penguin because, like you said, I was hoping for something that was going to be like, oh, I can't wait for next Sunday. I don't think this is that, but it is a show that I am looking forward to continuing to watch. I think that is largely part due to, I think you feel the same way. I just love the world of Dune. I think it's so interesting and so fascinating. Every time they drop the word Atreides, I'm like, yes, let's talk about the Atreides. But I'm excited for this show a little bit more than I was originally, but it's not something that I'm like craving and dying to see next week.
I'm actually surprised at that take. After watching, I was like, man, I'm not sure Jacob's gonna like this. So I'm actually really happy that you are kind of sold on it and that you are going to buy into it and excited. Maybe not as much, but still excited for the show. So that's a good review from you. I'm excited to hear that, and I think they did a good job expanding the world. Maybe not as much as they potentially should have. I think it's an odd point, in my opinion, to pick up in the Dune universe. I
Mm-hmm.
think it may have been a little cooler to even show the AI battle that they were talking about earlier. Maybe start at
Mm-hmm.
that moment and the recovering nations and how they develop the spice and how they have to use that because they've lost the access to computers. And now instead of these thinking machines, now they are becoming thinking machines themselves through the use of spice. I think maybe that would have been a potentially cleaner transition if you're going to go so far back, or even like the establishment of the sisters. It just seems like an odd moment to pull from the Dune universe. And the passing of the torch from one mother sister to the other, and kind of like planting the seed of manipulation within these houses. Now, I think what you said, like I think this may be even tying a little too close to the Dune movies when you pull it so far in the future, because they are going to be establishing the prophecy
Yeah.
of Paul Atreides. That is what this is going to be doing. I think that's been foreshadowed in the blue eyes that we're seeing when they pass
Hmm.
through death. We're seeing those two blue eyes, which could be mimicking the machines. I think they spent too much time on the machines to not include those more than we saw the little machine that the little 9-year-old groom brought in. So I think we're going to see some thinking machines come into this a little bit more potential. We might have some of the fight between the I can't remember. It wasn't Atreides, but it kind of sounded like Atreides. What was their house?
Yeah, there's well. So,
Um,
speaking of the houses, though, that's actually one thing I do agree. I hope we get more of it. But it was cool, kind of starting to see a couple of different houses that we weren't familiar with. Do you think that's something that's going to carry on, or do you think they are going to stick with the two houses that we talked about in this first episode?
Um, I think we're probably gonna see a few more, but not too many. I think there's only 8. Is there 8 great houses in Dune,
I
I
believe
think?
so.
So we may see up to 8. I don't think they're gonna expand the lore any of that. But yeah, I think there's a potential that we see that, but I think we'll probably stick within these 3 because we've seen Harkonnen, we've seen Atreides, we've seen um the other Emperor, um
So,
Emperor
so
1.
real, yeah. So I looked it up real quick. There's four major houses in Dune. We have House Atreides, House Harkonnen. This one says the Bene Gesserit, and then the Fremen. Those are considered like the four major houses, and then we have the Great Houses, which is I think a little bit more what we're going to be seeing in here because it says like House Vernius, House Guinness, House Halleck, and stuff like that. So I think we're probably going to be sticking more so around stuff like that. And we saw a couple of others in this episode that I hadn't heard of before. So I do agree. I think we'll probably get a couple more, but I don't think they're going to really push it outside of that area.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think so either. I don't think they would be as bold to spread that far outside
Hmm.
of the lore, since there are so many already in there. I don't think they would as well. So
So, getting into this first episode, we kind of start to see some things. We get to see really the start of the sisterhood, which is something that you kind of wish we would get a little more of. Do you think they go back in time at some point, maybe in the next couple episodes, and give us more of that backstory to some of these stuff? Maybe we do see a little bit more of the war with the thinking machines. Maybe we do get to see some of this other stuff. Or do you think this is going to be one of those shows that they just give us that little bit right there and they're going to be full steam ahead, pushing their main story forward for the rest of the season?
personally, I hope they don't. I think we saw as much back because we didn't see the start of the sisterhood. We saw like after the
Yeah.
one sister died, like I'm not even positive she created it after watching this one. So I don't think we saw the start of it, and I hope we don't. Like, if you would have chose to tell that story, let's tell that story. But chose to tell this story, so let's stay here. I like the flashback to the AI monster,
Mm.
the thinking monsters. I will say I think that looked amazing. I thought
Yeah.
the CGI in that moment was really well done. It looked good, and it was a little unexpected for me. Um, so that was a pleasant surprise. I didn't even know AI was in Dune, but I did look it up. Frank Herbert did plan for this to happen. Like that was mentioned in his book when he wrote it, which is amazing foresight from him to already be having this, you know, this distaste for AI, which at this point, as in our life, that's
Right.
crazy. Like how much AI we have, and he kind of wrote about this in times previous, which is pretty cool. Um, so yeah, no, I personally don't think we should do any more flashbacks. What about you?
Well, I think he was able to see that because of all that spice he was,
Mm,
partaking of.
sipping
But
on it.
No, I think we do push forward. I think we'll see a few more flashbacks. I think there's some things that they're going to want to talk about a little bit more. But I don't think it's necessarily going to be a whole lot. I think we probably stick to, um, is her name Vela? Was that her name, Vela Harkonnen? I might
Yeah.
be getting that wrong.
No, yeah, Valia.
And
Valia.
then Tula Harkonnen, her sister. Um, I think we'll see a little bit more of them and their flashbacks because they've already started to show themselves butting heads a lot. And I'm curious to see if she has used her power of being able to control people and make them do things like we see her do to the one girl where she stabs herself in the throat. I'm curious if she's ever done that to anybody else. And I think those are the things we might get little flashbacks of. Maybe them throwing jabs at each other like, oh, well, you made this person do this for your gain and that stuff. But I don't think we necessarily go back in time much more than that. I think if we do go back in time, it'll be very specific moments that really just kind of shape the characters, which I think that's fine. I do got to say, one of the characters I'm most interested in is Desmond Hart, which was the soldier that came back that they presumed was dead. I'm really interested in that character because I get very Paul Atreides vibes from that character. And do you think that's something maybe they were going for, is to give us something that would feel a little bit familiar to the Dune universe that we have with the movies? Or do you think ultimately that's going to be a character that's completely different?
I definitely think it's going to be completely different. I know he does have, um, like Paul Atreides esque like vibes a
Yeah.
little bit, but I don't think it's going to be anything like him. I don't even know if he is actually who he says he is.
Yeah.
Because in that video, it kind of looked like he was Fremen. It didn't look like
Hmm.
he was Atreides. So, personally, I was getting Duncan flashbacks, Jason Momoa's
Yeah.
character from the first one. That's who I was getting flashbacks to. It seemed exciting, and he also didn't dress like what their warriors seemed to. He did kind of have the tan, which was giving me Fremen vibes. And then at the end of the episode, we obviously see something's up with this dude. And I'm curious on that hologram that what's Emperor Corino
Hmm.
Emperor Corino, he plugged into the table. It showed a sandworm eating him, essentially. And so it's almost as if he lied directly to him that somebody else came and attacked him. And that the sandworm is actually what did it. So I'm curious if maybe he drank the blue fluid while he was in the sandworm, which allowed him to potentially have the power that we see at the end of the episode. And then also maybe his mind is a little twisted and seeing what will be happening as opposed to what actually did happen to him. Just a bunch of interesting things that are happening there with Desmond. He's definitely the most interesting part of the episode for me. I was very excited about his character, and I look forward to seeing what he'll do moving forward.
Yeah, I think his interaction with the Emperor was probably one of my favorite parts of the movie, where you kind of hear him say, which is kind of whether I'm kind of feel the same way as you. I'm interested to see if he was lying about it, especially after seeing the hologram, because he does talk about how he climbed his way out of the sand. He does talk about that a little bit and how when he first got that first breath, it felt like he was reborn. Those are things I'm interested to see where he was actually pulling some truth from and where he is lying from, because this guy is obviously full of deceit. Like, he's trying to trick people. He's trying to do stuff that he thinks is right. And I'm interested to see where that goes. And I'm also interested to see the connection with, we do see him having some sort of power there at the end of the episode. But we also see that he not only kills the boy, but essentially kills the Bene Gesserit that the Emperor does have when she is at Wallach 9, which is the, I guess, the home planet of the sisterhood. She also burns up in that same moment that the son, or that the young boy does. What do you think that kind of connection implicated? Do you think that's something that's going to really be touched on, or do you think it's maybe just like, that's the type of stuff that's got me interested in the show? Is like, they're doing some cool stuff, but, and I know it's episode 1, so I can't expect too much. But where does this all link together? Like, how fast are we going to find these things out? Is this going to be something that we don't find out till the very last episode? Is this going to be something, we find out fairly soon? Do you even think there is a connection between the boy and the girl both burning up at the same time? Like, what do you think about those things?
Yeah, I think it's Sister Emmeline, right?
Well, the one that
The
burned up
Asian
was
the Asian
Kasha.
Kasha. Sister Kasha? That was Emily. Anyway, regardless, What wasn't that the one that said that she had the link with the boy, that was the spawn, that she had the link since birth? Um, and so it's all these seeds that they're taking in. I believe that they are trying to show that the sisters have connection to the seeds that they use to implant their power in.
Okay.
Um, I think that's what they were trying to show. I'm not positive on that. You know, don't like throw tomatoes at me if I'm wrong, because it's very potential. I don't know much about this show, but that's kind of what I grasped that they were trying to show there, was that she had a connection to this boy and potentially this what man, sister Velia has tried to protect with the seed database,
Mhm.
of how she's going to plant people in power, is kind of more connected to the sisters than we intended. And I didn't know about this burning people alive power through the mind. I don't know how that happened. And then do it from worlds apart was
Yeah.
also something fascinating to me. That link, um, and apparently, I did kind of look up to kind of see if that was a book power, and apparently it is not something that is well known in the books, that you can burn people alive with your mind. So I'm interested to see. I thought that was a bold choice in episode one,
Yeah.
to kind of use that. Um, Instead of maybe just going with the more established what we've been shown in the movies, and then what Frank Herbert did come up with in the books, maybe sticking a little bit true to that. So interesting um, choice to make there, but nonetheless, I mean, I was super interested and kind of excited to see what all is going on with him and his ability, and if he is who he says he is.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think is probably the biggest question at this point is who is he? Because I do think he's probably maybe the most important. I don't want to say the most important character in the show, but I think he is ultimately going to be a staple of the show that is very important to how we move forward. So I'm super interested in that as well because he does have a power that is pretty powerful. It seems like, right? Like that's not something
Yeah,
that's
no, crazy.
so I'm interested to see him for sure. And then also the princess that was going to marry the young boy, she definitely has an agenda herself where we kind of see with her mother. She says she's not the only one that's able to convince people of things, right? She's not the only deceptive person there when her mother's kind of implying that she's been able to kind of control the empire through her husband a little bit. What do you think about that character? How big of a role do you think she ultimately plays in this story as well?
I think she's going to play a massive role in this story as she goes to the Bene Gesserits and starts her sisterhood training. I
Hmm.
don't assume that that's going to stop just because her um, husband to be got murdered.
Hmm.
I'm interested to see if that does continue. I thought her character was interesting. Um, they are definitely playing a vibe. Her training with her swordsman was very Paul Atreides esque.
Yeah.
From the Dune, there's definitely a correlation there. However, there's definitely some sexual tension between them, as played out at the end of the show, which I wasn't thrilled about. Um, the inclusion of, obviously, definitely put a damper on it for me. Why it seemed off tone,
Yeah.
them snorting cocaine and then hitting the slums up in a bar. I don't know. It didn't seem very Dune esque to me, which is fine. I know the Dune is a huge universe and there's a lot of stuff going on that we've not been privileged to see yet. But personally, I was not a super fan of her and her brothers outing. Now, I do think Princess Yin's or Yin's. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I forget how they pronounced
the
it. These
the
Dune names,
princess,
man.
the princess. I'm excited for her to start her training, to kind of see what her ability is, because it does seem like she's capable not only with hand to hand but also with manipulation. I
Mhm.
thought her interaction with the groom was super awkward and terrible. Like them feeding each other and how he fed himself, and then like awkwardly, horribly, like moved her veil out of the way and fed her. Like, oh man, that was a painful moment for me to watch, because I was like, oh man, I know it was meant to be awkward, but I think it was more awkward than they even intended at that moment.
Yeah. Well, I think it does play the part though a little bit because it is a 9-year-old boy and a fully grown woman, so it does make a little bit of sense. But I do agree. I was like, can we just get on with this scene? Like, I feel like this is just
It's
kind of
so
like,
weird.
yeah, kind of pointless. And the other thing, I guess we can go ahead and talk about our least favorite parts of the show because I also got to say, I think that was my least favorite part of the show was her and her half brother, hitting up the clubs and stuff like that. It felt so out of place. Like you just said, it did not feel like Dune. Anytime it would have been way cooler if whatever drug they did, which kids don't do drugs. I'm not saying it's cool that they did drugs, but why does it have to be something like cocaine? We're in this crazy world. Why couldn't they have drank some like green looking juice or make something that's going to make it feel more Dune? I don't like that direction that they went there. Like you said, I thought the sexual part of the show was so random. Like I did not expect to see that at all, especially with what we got in the Dune movies. They never really did stuff like that. I mean, they hinted at it, but that's all you need to do. We don't need to see full on, any of that stuff. So I agree. That was probably my least favorite part of the show because it did just feel so out of place. Is that also your favorite part of the show? Because I know you hinted at it, but you didn't say it was your least favorite. So maybe there's something else that you disliked even more than that.
Yeah, that was definitely my least favorite part of the show. I did have some other issues that I had with the Bene Gesserits. I didn't like Sister Jin. I didn't like her lying about killing her parents, or maybe potentially not lying about killing her parents,
Uh,
to deceive, and kind of that like test where they were seeing if the criminals could lie. Um, wasn't great for me. I don't think they did a great job with the second half of the Bene Gesserits when Valia was um, or Valia. I think it's Valia. Valia was kind of leading it, and they were training up the girls. I don't think they did a great job with that. But yeah, definitely the sister brother outing was definitely the worst part of the show for me.
Yeah, and I will say, talking about the sisterhood, I also do find myself annoyed with some of the aspects of it, but I am very interested in it because it is a big part of Dune. It's a big part of the world. Obviously, they have a big story to tell because they are the people that have been manipulating all these houses to do what they want for centuries, right? So I am very excited to kind of see that storyline come to light, and I'm also very excited about the little line, which we know she's a Harkonnen. Valia is the leader of the Sisterhood at this point in time, and she keeps denying the Harkonnens a truthsayer. So I'm very interested to see more of that story be told because I know that's going to be something that did touch on. We do see in that scene that she says the Houseins have requested a truthsayer for the fourth time, and she says, "Well, you can tell them for a fourth time no that they're not getting one." So I'm interested to see how that plays out because I don't know if it's maybe she has a problem with her past life and her family, which she does hint at some, but also is it more so just because she wants more control in a certain area with things and she is very strategically placing these truth sayers where she wants them when she wants them. So I will say, as much as I did have some issues like you just said, I do think it is a very interesting aspect of the show as well.
Yeah, I feel like she was potentially rejected by her own family, and that's the reason that she's not giving them one
Hmm.
is because she's holding a grudge.
Yeah.
Personally, I think her own values and her own uh, unwillingness to listen to those around her is going to be her downfall in this show, and what leads to potentially them having some struggles to gain the power that they think they should have. But yeah, that was super interesting that they were denying it. Everyone else seems to have one, and she
Yeah.
seems to have a plethora of them to send to where they go. And one of the great houses is requesting one. I thought that was interesting. That she said no. I also
Yeah.
loved the hand talking between
Yes.
the two. I thought that was super interesting moment. And then also like the name of the episode was The Hidden Hand. So I thought that was cool, kind of playing on them working behind the scenes, and then that kind of secret language when the two girls were talking about kind of how to advise when the leaders kind of went against what their original arrangements were. I thought that was a interesting moment and kind of something to kind of show a little play off of like how much they're working behind the scenes and what they really like. They're kind of letting the details slip. They don't have full control yet, but they're still very manipulative. So a lot of interesting stuff going on, but still I just don't think they nailed the pacing, and I think there was definitely some issues with the show. My favorite part of the show was using the voice when she was young. I thought that was really great moment, kind of going back to the back when Valia was going to take leadership and using that moment to use the voice that definitely got me excited. I love the power that they kind of developed here in the Dune universe with the voice, and what a cool, unique thing it was. And it seemed to be almost the first use of it because it seemed like I've
Mhm.
been developing this power. I thought that was cool, and I hope to get to see more of that throughout the future. Less lie detectors and more actual power manipulation. I think that'll be fun to develop throughout the show.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting hearing her also say, like, "Yeah, this is something I've been working on personally." And I also love the hand gestures as well, communicating through sign language, because I think that's cool and really good for a show like that because it does provide more of a storyline of where they're going. Like, if you're watching it and you kind of do know that the sisterhood's working together, that kind of really showed how they are doing it out in the field. Like, it's easy for them to sit at home and talk about how they're placing people where they want to be placed, but I did love that aspect as well, that these sisters are in communication with each other every opportunity they get to explain how their house is thinking, what their house is wanting, if the timing is right for both houses to make it not seem forced. I love that aspect of it. So I think they are really doing a good job with those things. I agree. I thought the pacing could use a little bit of work, but I do think this is, again, first episode. I think a lot of things will start to come together a little bit more. And I'm excited to see how that goes. Now, I know you said this isn't something that you're dying to watch like we were the Penguin, but does it at least have your interest piqued enough that you are at least, not dying to see the next episode, but you are at least looking forward to it?
It does because I like the universe, but I
Okay.
don't know how much I would be bought in if this was all I had. If this was my first introduction to the Dune universe, I don't think I would be sold and very excited to see what's coming.
Okay.
It seems like I needed more from an episode that is this long. Um, to really buy into, because I mean it is a long episode and they do a lot, but I just feel like it was a lot of telling and not a lot of actually like good story writing, at least in this first episode. So I see all the potential, and I would give it potentially a few more episodes. But if this was my first introduction to the Dune, I would not be super pleased off the rip.
Yeah, and I think that's fair to say. I am excited for it again just because I feel the same way. I love the universe. I think it's super cool. It definitely has my interest peaked enough that I'm looking forward to the next episode. I do want to see how this plays out. I do want to see how this prophecy really kind of comes to fruition and how they do scheme up the idea of the Paul Atreides stuff and all those things, because we know that's going to be something that's going to be talked about at some point. They've already name dropped the House Atreides a few times. We did see that it was 10,000 years before the birth of Paul Atreides. So that's definitely something I think they have on their mind, which is good. And I'm hoping that is something that really ends up paying off in the end and really kind of ties the movies to the show. I like that stuff, and it's one of those things I am worried about it because I don't want it to ruin the reputation of the movies. But if the show continues at this pace, I do think it's going to get better. I think it could end up being a really fun show and a really good show to watch. So I'm excited for it. I do look forward to it. First episodes can only do so much, and I don't think this one delivered on all aspects, but I did think it did enough just to have me excited for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and depending on what episode 2 does, I can definitely get more excited for this. But I'm glad that it did that for you, that you are excited for the rest of the season, that's what it performed. It performed as expected. And do you agree at this kind of moment that like the advertisement may have been a good thing that they did what they did?
So I personally still don't agree with that. I do think it needed to be more advertised because unfortunately, I know he's going to get his third movie. I know all those things are going to happen. Like, I'm not concerned about those things. I do think, though, that I wish more people were talking about this because I just think it does have potential. I think we've used that word a lot for the show. There's a lot of meat there. There's a lot of things to talk about. And I do think it's ultimately going to deliver. Like, after this first episode, I feel confident in the product that we're getting, that it's going to be a good show. And the thing that's going to bother me is I don't want to hear like, oh, Dune fell off, no one's watching the show. But I do think this is one of those situations where it could travel word of mouth like Penguin did. I don't think Penguin had a lot of hype going into it, and then it became this behemoth of a show that everybody was talking about that was getting super high rated scores. Now, I don't know if I have the same aspirations for this show. But I do wish it was marketed a little bit more, just to have more eyes on it, just to get more people involved. Because it just still seems like such a strange choice to me. Have the biggest movie of the year, not number wise, but credit wise, all everything that it was, going to be nominated for. It's probably going to win a ton of awards and all that stuff. And not many people knew about this show coming out. So those are still concerns I have. I still want it to be something that ultimately gets its flowers, just because I love the Dune universe so much. But I do also get what you're saying. Maybe it wasn't a terrible thing that it hasn't been marketed, because maybe this is more of a thing for the diehard fans that are going to watch it regardless.
Yeah, which is fine, right? Like we'll be okay with that, even
Yeah.
if we don't get his flowers, even if everything doesn't turn out fine, it'll be all right.
Yeah, ultimately, not every show needs to be a 10 out of 10, right? There's going to be shows that just, fun to watch, get you through the week when you don't have anything else to watch. And that very well ultimately could be what this ends up being, just, a filler till we get to something that is really new and exciting. But I'm excited for the rest of it. I think it has a lot of potential. I think that might be the name of this episode of the podcast, is, it does it have the potential? But
Yeah, I'm in love with your potential, you know?
yeah, I am in love with the potential of this show. I think it's a really good opportunity for them to do some cool stuff. And anytime we're getting some Dune universe, because I think it is one of the coolest universes out there, I'm excited for it. So
Yeah. And I am as well. So I'm glad that we're here, right? In episode
yes,
1, reviewing it, we have some Dune content. That's exciting. It could be more exciting, but I'm still happy it's here. So
for sure. But as far as other information goes, I think that's about all the stuff we have for this week's episode of the podcast. Like Zane mentioned earlier, we do have our super fun comic corner next week, which I'm super pumped about. I think anytime there's comic books involved, I'm going to get excited. So that's something you guys have to look forward to in the future. But overall, pretty slow week. It's going to keep you a little bit shorter this week, but you guys might be a little bit thankful for that, because we can be a little bit long-winded sometimes. So having just a short week is sometimes nice for us, especially with how busy it has gotten, especially in Zane's life with him picking up basketball reffing and all those things going on. It's nice sometimes just to be able to spend some time talking to you all and getting to know a little bit more about the comics and the shows that we're watching. But Zane, do you have anything else you wanted to talk about before this episode comes to a close?
no, guys, I just wanted to say thank you guys for tuning in week after week. We do have our Discord that we do link in the show notes. If you want to get in a little bit more involved in the conversation, if you want to give us recommendations, see our past rankings, or even just chat with us, hop into some games if we're on gaming. The Discord link is in the show notes, so feel free to click that link. As always, you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, X, wherever you find your content, and then the podcast is streaming wherever you're currently listening. But we're also on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, wherever you please to find your weekly fix. We hopefully will be there. So thank you guys for listening. That's all I got.
Yeah, so like you said, we are on every platform. So if you have a friend that doesn't use Spotify, they can listen to us on Apple. Like we're everywhere. So definitely go check us out. Let your friends know. Tell a family member. And we also do appreciate when you guys do rate, comment, do whatever you guys want to do. Let us know if there's something you guys want us to talk about. We said that all the time. If you guys want us to talk about something in particular, we're always open to suggestions, and you can shoot those to us on Discord, like Zane just mentioned, or onto any of our social media platforms. We'll always be happy to respond to you there. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of Weekly Fix. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.